Good morning. This meeting of the Baltimore City Council Health, Environment, and Technology Committee is now called to order. I am Councilwoman Danielle McCray, representing the 2nd District and Chair of the committee. In attendance today for committee members, we have Councilman Mark Conway from the 4th District, Councilman Ryan Dorsey from the 3rd District, Councilwoman Felicia Porter from the 10th District, Councilman Isaac Yichi-Slifer from the 5th District. From the council president's staff, we will have Nikki Thompson joining us shortly. And from the mayor's office, we have Nina Themilis and Sophia Gabrinois. Also in attendance, we have Matthew Peters, who is staff to the committee. Before we get started, just a couple of ground rules as always. Please stay muted until you are recognized by the chair. Please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Before you speak, please identify yourself, the agency or organization that you are with, and your position. We ask that committee members and city agency officials please keep your video on for the duration of the hearing unless there are technical difficulties preventing you from doing so. Last, for the members of the public, there will be an opportunity for public testimony. Today, the committee is hearing Resolution 21-0082R, Investigative Hearing, What is the State of Stat? And Bill 21-0161, City Operations, Net Zero Emissions of Greenhouse Gases. We're going to start with Resolution 21-0082R for the purpose of requesting that the city administrator, the deputy city administrator, each of the deputy mayors, the chief data officer, the director of the Office of Performance and Innovation, the director of the Baltimore City Office of Information Technology, and the heads of data-driven strategies and performance management from each city agency come before the city council to discuss the current state of data collection, evaluation, and how we're using the tenets of CityStat to address internal process issues to help close service delivery gaps. For this hearing, we're going to start with brief opening remarks from the resolution sponsor, which is Councilman Mark Conway. Then we're going to hear reports from city officials and agencies and give committee members the opportunity to ask questions. After that, we're going to go ahead and move on to public testimony. We're going to hear from the resolution sponsor. Chair recognizes Councilman Conway.
Thank you, and good morning, Madam Chair and the committee. I really appreciate the opportunity to have this discussion today. This bill is really talking about CityStat, where it is today. As you guys all know, this is a program that is very near and dear to me personally because it is where I grinded my teeth when I began working in Baltimore City. It also is one of the finest tools in government management, started in the early 2000s, and has been a scion of best government practices across the world. It's been acknowledged by the Harvard Kennedy School of Public Policy. It's been acknowledged by the Center for Government Excellence. It has been shown to be a very effective tool for managing city government. Part of the reason why I brought this bill forward is because the CityStat program, as I understand, has gone through some ups and downs with the various administrations coming in and out, and realizing the importance of the program to city operations and follow-up and follow-through for various concerns that the council may have or that constituents may have. I believe it's incredibly important that we make sure that our city government is working well, and that one of the best tools of making sure that we do so is working well as well. So with that, really appreciate once again, Madam Chair, the opportunity to hear this bill and talk about the CityStat program and see where we are. And I look forward to a vibrant discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Conway. We're going to hear from city officials and agency representatives, and then there will be a presentation from the Mayor's Office of Performance and Innovation. Committee members, please hold your questions until after the presentation. We're going to start with the City Administrator's Office. Do you stand by your report?
I do.
Okay, next we're going to the Mayor's Office of Performance and Innovation. I know that you guys have a presentation. Do you stand by your report?
We do.
Okay. Office of Information and Technology, do you stand by your report?
We do.
Okay. The 311 Call and Dispatch Center, do you stand by your report?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Police Department, do you stand by your report?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
Okay. And the Fire Department, do you stand by your report?
Yes, we do.
We have a number of agencies that we're going through, so thank you everyone for your patience. For DGS, the Department of General Services, do you stand by your report?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Department of Public Works,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we stand by our report.
great. Department of Recreation and Parks, do you stand by your report? We're going to move on to the Department of Planning. Do you stand by your report?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Department of Finance,
Yes, we do.
Department of Transportation,
Madam Chair, we stand by our report.
okay. Department of Housing and Community Development,
Yes, Madam Chair, we stand by our report.
Department of Health,
Yes, we stand by our report.
great, and Department, our City Solicitor's Office.
Hello, Madam Chair. Yes, the Law Department approves the bill for form and legal sufficiency.
Okay, thank you. We're going to hear a presentation from the Mayor's Office of Performance and Innovation at this time. Again, committee members, please hold your questions until after the presentation.
Good morning again, Chair McCray and distinguished members of the City Council Committee on Health, Environment, and Technology present today. For the record, my name is Chris Shorter and I serve as the city's administrator. I'm here this morning to provide some remarks and to start the hearing before I hand it over to Dan Heimowitz, Director of the Mayor's Office of Performance and Innovation. Our Chief Data Officer, Justin Elzaz, and representatives from the Departments of General Services, Transportation, the Police Department, and our Department of Housing and Community Development to discuss how our government uses data to administer programs, monitor performance, and improve our services. The primary message I would like to convey this morning is that although this hearing is really focused on and addresses the state of STAT, the City STAT program is just one of the many ways that our government uses data to monitor and improve government operations. As you know, our city is well known for being one of the earliest to adopt and regularly use and systematically use data to drive performance and manage our operations. The work we have already done and are continuing to do in this administration will build upon that legacy of excellence. This focus, if you will, is evident through the addition of the city's chief data officer as a cabinet level position, but also through other initiatives that I will touch on briefly, but will be touched on throughout the presentation this morning. One initiative that we are developing under this administration that will use data to drive performance, decision-making, accountability, and transparency is the agency performance plan process, or this framework we've discussed in public hearings before. Starting in 2023, we will develop annual performance plans for each agency that will capture key performance indicators, targets, and strategic initiatives for each agency. This will create a mutual and objective baseline understanding of agencies' performance and allow us to track trends over time. This process will also further institutionalize the use of data throughout all levels of our city government. These plans will also allow us to clearly share information about the agency's performance with council and with the public to further enhance transparency. The mayor's action plan is another initiative that uses data to inform our decisions. The mayor has committed to driving progress towards over 180 actions across 5 pillars. The plan has key performance indicators established to help monitor performance for each goal. We are managing the execution of this plan through a systematic and structured project management approach to help us prioritize actions and drive accountability. Under the Scott administration, we have reinitiated the outcome budgeting process. We are currently concluding this process. However, the results teams that provided recommendations to the mayor reviewed agency submitted performance data as factors that influence their budget decisions. And finally, our Office of Recovery Programs is using performance data both as a part of its reporting requirements to Council and the U.S. Department of Treasury, and as part of the evaluation that will occur with our university partners. As you will see throughout this presentation this morning, our agencies use performance data daily to guide their decision-making processes and to support the continuous improvement of the services that they provide to residents each and every day. We will continue to lead through the use of data, and I want to just take a moment again to thank you for creating a forum for us and for the agencies to share with Council and the public the great work being done around the use of data. Thank you.
Thank you, City Administrator. Chair McCray, committee members, my name is Dan Heimowitz. I'm the Director of the Mayor's Office of Performance and Innovation, of which CityStat is part of. I'll talk a little bit about what else is happening in this presentation, and then a bit about CityStat itself. So I'll present first again about CityStat before turning it over to our Chief Data Officer. And then these are the agencies that are going to share today a bit about how they are using data to manage their operations and performance within their institutions, and really pleased that they're here today to be part of this discussion. So first, some additional opening comments building on what City Administrator Shorter has just said. The City Administrator has already stated and noted the extent to which data is at the heart of everything we're doing in this government to improve the lives of city residents. Building on those different areas that the City Administrator mentioned in terms of the different processes where data is being used to manage performance, wanted to present this way of thinking about it as well. So CityStat is here to focus on deep analysis and problem solving around top mayoral priorities. That's where we focus. But again, it's looking at number 2, it's not just about CityStat today. It is increasingly about the institutionalization of the use of data for performance within agencies, which is why we're excited the agencies are here today to present. And then in addition to that, I think a really important thing that's happened under this administration is this, elevated and energized work championed by our Chief Data Officer that is supporting data-driven culture, governance, and transparency in a way that is really a key enabler to everything else that we're talking about here today. It's not just us here in the administration saying this. We recently were recognized by What Works Cities, which is a national organization that does comprehensive assessments of how cities are using data. And this was our best ever recognition by What Works Cities. This is quite a comprehensive review that this organization does, encompassing everything from data governance to general management, to how we're using open data to performance and analytics. It's an extensive review. And again, I think it's notable that the city was recognized as taking a stride in its most recent assessment of what of where Baltimore is. So that's a bit of an additional overview. Let's now talk about CityStat itself, which is again a critical piece of this overall data and performance picture here in this in this administration. So CityStat is part of the overall Office of Performance and Innovation. And just to note the other components of the OPI office, there's also a Data Fellows program, which I'll talk briefly about in a bit, and the Mayor's Innovation Team, which is a team that works on big city challenges using data and design to shape new ways of approaching challenges. And I can say more about that, though I think today's focus will mainly be about the CityStat part of OPI. In terms of CityStat under Mayor Scott, as Councilman Conway noted in his opening remarks, there's been changes to CityStat over the years since the inception of the office over 2 decades ago. These are some of the key features under this administration. First of all, the mayor and his executive leadership team's direct engagement and involvement in this process is critical and is happening in a way that I think is truly, really a meaningful change from the way things have sometimes been operated in the city, and really important to the effectiveness of what CityStat does. Number 2, fundamentally, CityStat is about accountability, meaning for each of our stat processes, we have structured frameworks and goals and key performance indicators associated with those goals. And fundamentally, in our stat meetings, that is what we are reviewing: how well agencies are performing against those goals and KPIs. In addition to accountability, I do think this is a bit of a newer emphasis in this administration. We aim to bring added value through deep analysis, in addition to reporting out on the actual KPIs. So deep understanding that allows for real problem solving in these meetings, that I think is a bit of a new emphasis that goes beyond some of the past ways that CityStat has operated. This is a look at some of the current and upcoming stats that CityStat is operating, but also that city agencies are operating internally to manage their own operations. So you can see the kind of the breadth of it. Some of these are more focused on the activities of a particular agency, like police stat. Some are around a cross-cutting issue that involve multiple agencies and partners, such as YouthStat. And some are a bit more focused on a targeted particular issue. For example, PayStat is focused on the city's payment of vendors, and looking at the timeliness of that of those payments. And so that's a bit an example of a more targeted version of a stat. We're not going to have a chance to, in this presentation, at least talk about all these, but glad to speak to some of those stats in the discussion part of this hearing. But I'll highlight 2 here. First of all, CleanStat is one of our major stats that we operate. It's a bi-weekly multi-agency stat process focused on how the city is operating all of its core cleaning services. You can see a bit here, a high-level look at the framework that we use to focus on this. It encompasses many different aspects of city cleaning services, starting with, for example, property maintenance, but also looking at our routine services. And we complement the use of quantitative data in this meeting with the inspections that our CityStat inspector does by going out to actually visit sites in person to see that work indeed has happened. PoliceStat, another key major stat that what we wanted to highlight here and mention here today. This is a major effort through which the mayor and his leadership team used to establish clear expectations and to hold the police department accountable for reducing violent crime, but also maximizing the institution's organizational effectiveness. There's a lot that we do in PoliceStat, so won't have a chance to speak to all of these areas, but you can see the different areas and then some of the metrics that we look at within those different areas. The other thing I wanted to mention connected to stats is as the city administrator spoke to in his introduction, this forthcoming performance management system, which I think is going to be a really key innovation for the city in terms of ensuring a truly comprehensive approach to how performance management is happening in the city. And the addition that I think is going to be really important is the establishment of clear metrics and targets that agencies will establish at the beginning of each budget year and then report out publicly on in a way that goes at a level of breadth that I think will be really, really important to the city's management going forward. I referred to earlier our Data Fellows program. This is a really important complementary program to our city stat process. In the Data Fellows program, we have data analysts who we basically embed within city agencies to help support improvements to how those agencies use data. And agencies to date have hosted fellows, and these fellows in many ways are becoming the next generation of data leaders in our government, graduating into more senior roles as they move along. And we highlight here on this slide one example of a very exciting Data Fellows project, the soon to be launched dashboard to show the impact of Baltimore's 911 diversion program. So just an example of the work that the Data Fellows do that complements the work of CityStat. And with that, I will turn it over to our city's Chief Data Officer to continue our presentation.
Thanks, Dan. Good morning, Chairwoman McCray, Councilman Conway, and fellow committee members. Thanks for the opportunity to talk through how we're using data in government. I want to speak to a few topics here that kind of support and enhance the role of data, both for performance management and more generally about how we serve residents and improve our operations. Thank you. Go to the next slide. While he's getting the next slide up, I can highlight a few things. So first, with regards to data governance, I think last year, probably at the budget hearing, was the last time I had the opportunity to speak to you all about our data governance work. This is how we become better stewards of this really critical asset for the city. I want to highlight a couple of things that we've worked on. Pretty soon, we'll be publishing a data inventory on Open Baltimore. This is a comprehensive inventory of our data assets. So this will aid residents in understanding what data the city collects. And just as important, it will help our agencies discover what each other are collecting. So hopefully that aids in problem solving. A couple of other things, as our city administrator described earlier, we have kind of various lenses through which we're exploring performance and equity using data. And that even within the mayor's office, there are various components of this, whether it's city stat program or these forthcoming agency performance plans that will be part of city stat, the recovery office, our outcome budgeting process. All of these things are various lenses that are capturing performance measures, regarding agency performance. We're aiming to kind of ensure that all of those are aligned, both in terms of how we define those performance measures, make sure that we're moving towards the same thing, and even hopefully simplifying some of the actual technical tools to make this less burdensome for agencies to do this reporting. Our agency data stewards. So a data steward is one or more representatives from each of our city agencies who are responsible for things like data quality, inventories, kind of the data governance on behalf of their agency, and are really the representative to our data governance committee. At the end of 2021, we did a voting session on where we wanted to focus our attention next, and what came to the top was data quality. And so right now we've been providing a toolkit. This is available openly on Open Baltimore. So if you go to the data governance tab on Open Baltimore, you'll find this data quality toolkit. So you can see exactly what our data stewards are working on. from problem identification to discovery to understand documents and how things are defined and what systems are being used, all the way through to interventions. So can we actually improve and measure the improvement in the quality of the data that we're capturing? The last is on ownership and access. We've encountered several instances where we have data analysts who are ready for and are hungry for more data in their agency to help support good decision making and operations. And we run into either technical or even legal challenges to getting access to that data. We are standardizing some kind of boilerplate language. Obviously, this can be customized for each contract, as the case may be. But we want to provide for better data ownership and better data access for the city so that we can be better stewards of the data and leverage it as much as possible. Dan, next slide. Next is around training. Our mayor, the mayor's action plan. In that mayor's action plan, Mayor Scott and the city administrator committed us to developing a citywide data training program. There are some existing resources, including something we're eager to promote, which was actually we kind of stumbled upon, but our ENAC free library actually offers the Udemy catalog of online courses. And this is relevant because there are quite a lot of data and technology and business courses in that catalog that I think our data analysts throughout the city are eager to take advantage of. So we've been working to promote that. But as well, we've also partnered with the Center for Government Excellence at Johns Hopkins University to develop a catered custom training program for the city. We can imagine this folk having a couple of different tracks. One I would classify as maybe kind of the administrative analyst tier of city staff who maybe they're doing that manual reporting or working with a clunky Microsoft Excel spreadsheet each week. We want to provide them better tools and training to do that job more efficiently and more effectively. Next slide. Obviously, a huge component of data in government is providing for transparency and openness, and this is a cornerstone of Mayor Scott's administration. There are a couple of ways that we've seen this already in the first year of the administration. One is the mayor's action plan that was published. Right now, what you'll see online is a series of actions that will also include shortly key performance indicators, so performance measures. So how are we moving the needle on the various goals set forth by the mayor, and kind of aggressive targets to see how we're moving the needle on those goals. The action plan also commits us to expanding Open Baltimore, so development of more public data sets and not just raw data, which is really how open data kind of started out. 10 years ago, there was a huge movement in city governments to produce, open raw data, but providing more data tools and products to help residents understand how the city is functioning, understand their communities better. There are a couple of other things to highlight quickly. One is we aim to track MPIA requests a little bit more deliberately and more thoughtfully. We want to actually we've launched a blog. Hopefully, some of you have seen that on Open Baltimore. This is meant to be kind of a collaborative effort across agencies so that other agencies can write guest posts on how they're using data in their agency. The latest one actually just published yesterday. I'm really excited to share this with everyone. OPI led an effort to recreate some of the data visualizations that were created by W.E.B. Du Bois. This was for the 1900 World Fair. There's a pretty popular book that came out just a few years ago that it was about these data visualizations, and we recreated a lot of those data visualizations using not just data about the United States and Black America, but specifically with regard to the city of Baltimore and updating that data to be current. So check out Open Baltimore. There's a link to the blog at the top. And please feel free to take a look at that blog. Again, OPI kind of led that effort, and I'm really excited to share that. Dan, if you want to go to the next slide. Right, so we've demonstrated kind of leadership, being committed to data, Mayor Scott, city administrator. there's also been a lot of leadership taking place, what I would say at kind of the grassroots level. So data analysts organizing themselves in various capacities to share how they're problem solving, how they're analyzing data, and really kind of help each other in their careers using data in government. So I just wanted to highlight a few of those venues. Dane, you want to go to the next slide? Last but certainly not least, and this is a really current development, there are a couple of partnerships that we are launching as we speak to support our fire department and EMS. They're alluded to here a couple of projects. One is around hospital wait times. Our ambulances spend a considerable amount of time waiting at emergency departments to offload patients. Can we use data and some collaboration with our local hospitals and facilitated by the Bloomberg Harvard City Leadership Program to reduce those wait times? We'll be launching opioid stat this year. This is supported by a fellowship with the Harvard City Leadership Initiative. This will bring together, again, kind of external and internal partners to stat the opioid crisis. And I say that broadly. This is meant to be a collaborative effort, not just hard-edged accountability, but also problem solving and identifying gaps in our opioid epidemic strategy. Our data fellows in OPI are going to be supporting EMS, analyzing dispatch data for EMS, again, with the hopes of reducing things like hospital wait time, improving workload. And we're also looking to partner with a group called Data Science for Social Good out of Carnegie Mellon University. This would bring a team of data scientists trainees to focus on optimizing our EMS dispatch. This is work they've previously done with the city of Cincinnati. We're hoping to bring that here, and we're having discussions with them to do so. What this alludes to, I think this last one in particular, is that we are quickly moving beyond just using data to analyze what's happened in the past as a way of saying what our performance is, but building new tools that will predict what can happen in the future to support better decision making and better operations. This is a step change in terms of the organization's data maturity. So I'm really excited and this is just kind of one example. I think there might be a couple of pilot projects over the next year where we're hoping to demonstrate the value of that, of data science and predictive analytics. I'll stop there. Dan, feel free to.
All right. Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you, Dan. Madam Chair and members of the committee, Liam Davis with Baltimore City Department of Transportation. I'm also joined by Webster Mulba, who is our chief data analyst. So I'm going to run through this pretty quickly for the sake of time. So I just want to stress that the emphasis of data-driven governance that we see here today from the Scott administration has definitely been embraced by the Department of Transportation. Since being appointed director, Steve Sharkey, as the director of Department of Transportation, has definitely prioritized the use of data at City DOT. In doing so, we've also taken steps to increase our capacity to analyze data, hiring a number of data analysts and adding them to our team. The Department of Transportation is one of the larger city agencies. It's pretty sprawling in terms of the numbers of divisions that we have. The tasks and services that we provide are unique to each division. Safety division is going to be focusing on different things for maintenance division, and tech division is going to be doing things differently than towing, and so on and so forth. There's over 70 individual 311 requests that we're assigned to managing. And in addition to that, there's a number of data fields that we're tracking beyond 311. Examples include equity metrics, automated enforcement violations, transit ridership from our transit bureau, crash data, which is tying into our new traffic calming policy, and pavement condition index when we're determining which roads need to be resurfaced next year. Next slide. So when we talk specifically about the state of stat at Department of Transportation, we're certainly very excited to talk about this because we've really emphasized under the leadership of Director Sharkey the use of the stat tool. I think Councilman Conway knows this well, that Director Sharkey originated in city government out of the city stat office, and you can certainly see that reflected in how the agency is managed. So as I said in the previous slide, each of these stats is unique in and of itself, generally because of the division it's focused on, but it even gets more unique than that. So if we look at traffic stat, that means tri-weekly. That's specific to traffic division. We're looking at all, traffic related service requests. How many are open? How many are closed? Is there a backlog? How much do we have to get done to kind of meet the standards that are set upon us? Transit stat is more focused on transit bureau. So again, we're looking at transit ridership, on-time performance of Charm City Circulator, the Harbor Connector, water taxi service. Conduit stat is kind of speaks in and of itself to conduit division. There's a big focus on capital projects and revenue coming in from leasees. They meet monthly. Tow stat is another monthly meeting. Towing division focused. You're looking at intake and outflow at our various impound lots. There is a capacity limit there, so you have to measure your intake and your flow in and out of there to maintain towing service. Overtime stat is agency wide. You're pulling in all your division chiefs monthly to look at overtime. Are we meeting our overtime budget? Are there opportunities for savings? Do we think we're going to need a supplemental? Hopefully not. Next slide. Physical stat is looking at, it's a big agency, lots of capital projects, items that need to be cured, equipment that needs to be procured. You're tracking, those procurement orders, you're tracking to make sure vendors are getting paid, etc. That meets tri-weekly. Maintenance division meets bi-weekly. Maintenance division is probably one of our busiest divisions in the agency. They're the ones getting the pothole requests. They're the ones getting the street lighting outages. And just to throw that out there, there's 78,000 street lights in the city. So that's just one function of maintenance division, and they definitely get a lot. So that's bi-weekly. ATVS stat is a monthly meeting focused on our automated speed, truck, and red light camera enforcement. Zero stat meets monthly, and this is kind of a consortium of representatives from our divisions focused on driving down the number of crashes with the goal of zero related crash deaths. That's the end goal there, making our roads safer. And lastly, project stat. That is focused on transportation, engineering, and construction, tech division. Those are our larger capital projects, tracking their status, your streetscapes, your bridge projects, your major resurfacing projects, etc. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to, I believe, Kimberly Rubens from the Department of Housing and Community Development.
Thank you, Liam. Always great to hear what other agencies are doing. Good morning, Chairwoman McCray and members of the committee. I am Kimberly Rubens, Acting Chief of Policy and Partnerships, as well as Director of Research and Analytics. I will be representing DHCD. My primary job function for the agency is to coordinate the design and implementation of data-driven policy programs and strategic planning. Hopefully the screen grab from CodeMap looks familiar to all of the members of the committee, as this is both a repository of information from 5 databases across DHCD's division, as well as our primary tool for strategic planning throughout the agency. Next slide. On this slide, I won't read all of them to you, but you will see how DHCD uses CodeMap, in addition to how everyone from various divisions all the way to the general public and the mayor's office uses it, as well as the frequency at which it is used. I will take this opportunity while this slide is up to discuss one of the ways in which we use data-driven strategic planning for how we determine what receivership cases with the agency will file on an annual basis. So the agency has the capacity to file approximately 500 cases using 11 staff attorneys. There are, as of this morning, I wrote this down, 14,956 vacant properties that are registered with the city of Baltimore. So obviously we cannot file receivership cases on all of them. So after a VDN has been issued for a vacant property and it has received 3 citations, it is automatically sent to the Permits and Litigation Division for receivership case review. And from there, the division will use 6 criteria to determine whether or not that property is a good candidate for receivership. Next slide. This is the agency's key stats dashboard. Please excuse my dog. She has 10 pounds of chaos. This is the agency's key stats dashboard. It is updated 3 times a day. It is reviewed every week on Monday mornings at our senior leadership team meeting, and it is primarily an outcome tracking tool. Next slide. This is our investment map. Again, the about and the uses are on the right-hand side for review at a later time. But primarily, the most important thing to take away from this investment map is this is how our agency ensures that we are spending our money equitably throughout the city, and that the way that we're spending money aligns with our agency's vision for equitable neighborhood development. Next slide. This is the tool that I'm probably most excited to discuss. It is our project tracker for the impact investment areas after more than 2 years of block level planning that we've been doing in lockstep with our community partners across the 7 geographic areas. We have now set up what is both a action plan and performance management tool. So it has a robust interface that would allow any user, and this is publicly available information, to look at all of the development projects going on in, say, East Baltimore Midway, as well as the action steps needed to execute that development project, the responsible organization, needed resources, percentage funded, and the zone that it is in the impact investment area. And with that, I believe I'm handing it over to DGS.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Council. All protocol observed. My name is Frank Fortka. I'm the Division Chief for the Office of Performance Management. On this slide, this is our organizational chart. Previously, this division was run by BPIO, Business Process Improvement Office, comprising of Change Management, ISMT. We consolidated, as you see here, and added visibility to our data governance and the project management section, PaperGov, with our Integrify workflow. Next slide, please. Here, this is our data and business process improvement map, what we call, our data universe. The DGS stats, set our KPIs reflected, in our SharePoint site. The data governance addresses data issue in conjunction with all these sections and working with our divisions. The DPI provide business analytics, PaperGov workflow automation. Good to note here, Madam Chair and the Council, with the new section of project management, we use Project Management Institute and lean methodologies to increase efficiency, eliminate waste. Our change management section drives organizational change, and our IT, support solutions. Next, please. In terms of data by the numbers, 12 months since relaunch of our, data initiative, we hold regular meetings and, weekly and bi-weekly. And to note here, very important, driven by, our ever chair, Director Chichi, and now DCAO is first Thursday start, where all divisions present data for the month, and, improvement issues are followed by the Office of Performance Management. We have 7 division and unit that submit reports monthly. Approximately 20 reports are reviewed monthly and about 240 annually. Next, please. Across our division, this is how data is used with fleet. One of our, the KPI captured, reflected here is a percentage of, preventive maintenance. They meet monthly, and, fleet now relies mostly on work frequency, maintenance, repair, to make decisions. And they've been able to improve the speed of, processing invoices through a faster web in 7 days down to 30 standard. This is internally. With facility, the corrective maintenance, completed on time. They meet, weekly, to review, project status meeting, backlog and volume of work in others in Acrobat system. With fiscal, the percentage of contract, an acceptable burn rate. They meet, weekly to discuss, issues relevant to data and, account payable, and to note here, one of the things we'll be able to work is the contract management process. We've done an internal mapping and we've moved, our fiscal from the burden of, Express spreadsheet to, create a dashboard in SharePoint, and we've seen improvement in the operations. We've captured a project and energy. They meet bi-weekly, to manage project timelines and completion rates. HR, percentage of COVID-19 vaccine SOP, they report on a monthly basis, the percentage of the compliance, as well as the percentage of vacancies by position, position filled by division. Notably here, we have, introduced a new initiative called SEMI, the Strategic Employment Management Initiative, which is very exciting. We just completed, transitioning our HR burden from Express spreadsheet to automated workflow in our Integrify system. Our phase 2 will be, approaching the hiring process and moving on to other phases. With our OPM data governance initiative, we meet, they meet monthly to review data opportunity, data quality improvement, and work with CityStat, create and maintain our key data set, key performance indicators, that are reflected in our main system of, Acrobat, Faster, Workday, and we have our project status meetings, every week, and it's an opportunity for us to review what is outstanding in every division and how we need to address it. I think I'm done, and the next presenter.
Great. Good morning, Madam Chair, Councilman Conway, esteemed council members, and fellow data colleagues. My name's Graham Campbell. I am the Managing Director for Data-Driven Strategies for the Baltimore Police Department, and I'm excited to talk to you guys today. Very briefly, I understand. So if we can get the next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we use data sort of in a linear fashion. First, I just want to mention that dashing gentleman right there on the left is Jack Maple. He was a lieutenant in the New York City Transit Police, and he developed CompStat in 1994, and he is the reason why all of us are here now. We've been statting things since before statting was cool, and so I just want to point out that it's just been we stat a lot of stuff, and that begins with CompStat. So as many of you know about CompStat, it happens every Thursday. It's a weekly accountability meeting for the department. It used to be operations focused and a lot more yelling. And it's transitioned to a 360-degree model, which was developed by the National Policing Institute, which used to be called the National Police Foundation up until about a week ago. And there's 3 pillars for CompStat 360. One is basically, one is preventing and interrupting and solving crime. The other is managing organizational effectiveness. And the last one is integrating and elevating community and government partners. So we discuss as a department how we do that on a weekly basis. We look at trends and outcomes and patterns at a high level. It's sort of the idea is a big picture view of the department. And it's now collaborative in nature, right? We're all sort of sitting down talking about the department's issues. In addition to crime, we're looking at recruitment, we're looking at vehicles, we're looking at compliance with body-worn camera footage, those kinds of things, right? So in addition to COVID-19 stuff. So that's sort of the big picture for CompStat. We go one step down below CompStat to the operations view. Next slide, please. And we get to our crime briefings, right? These are held 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. They are operational focused, right? So it's really, we're talking about, we review crimes from the previous reporting period. We're talking much more detail about case updates, any kind of coordination that needs to happen between our criminal investigations division and the patrol districts or other folks in the department to help out. And then on Wednesdays, for example, like today at noon, we're going to be doing deep dives around CJIC or crime guns. So looking at how we're linking crime guns across the city of Baltimore, across districts, and determining what the linking factors are, the people, the places. So that's sort of the purpose around the crime briefing. It's a step down, a more sort of microscopic view. And then to get even further down into the weeds, next slide, please, is the small group calls or pattern calls. And this is like super weedy, right? And this is when we have trends identified or patterns identified. We have a robbery pattern, we have a burglary pattern. It's a much smaller group of relevant stakeholders. And it's, again, as I mentioned, it's super in the weeds. We're talking about names, we're talking about people, where they hang out, who their parents hung out with, like whatever, anything that we think is relevant to sort of figuring out how we can solve or stop sort of the pattern that's happening. Again, we're hoping to use Microsoft Teams. Teams currently is one of 6 states. Maryland's one of 6 states that is not allowed to use Teams for sort of criminal information currently. That's a state issue we're trying to work through right now. But that will help us sort of share not only voice and video communication like this, but also documentation and files and things inside the department securely. And again, the whole purpose for this is really to get to, we already talk already, right? Like if I had $1 for every time I heard like, no, we don't need to have a meeting, we are already talking, I would be a very, very rich man. So the idea is that we want to have a meeting, it's like, I trust you, but we really want to make sure that we are coordinating on this. And so we're trying to we're setting up meetings to make sure, and then there's follow-up, obviously, we're documenting during the meetings and figuring out what happened, did it work? And then, what do we need to do next? And that's my last slide. So thank you very much for your time.
Madam Chair, that's the end of our presentation. I didn't know if you wanted us to leave up the slides or to pull them down. So just whichever is better.
We're going to go ahead and pull the slides down for now. I do want to, and thank you all for this coordinated presentation. I did want to say that we have been joined by 2 additional committee members during the presentation, and I wanted to acknowledge them both. Councilman James Torrance as well as Councilman John Bullock are present at this time. I also wanted to double back to Rex and Parks, Jenny Morgan, I believe, to see if you guys stand by your reports. I understand that there was a WebEx error earlier.
Yes, Madam Chair, Recreation and Parks stands by our report, and we have representatives on here if there are any questions from the committee.
Okay, great. We are going to move into questions from committee members at this time, and I'm going to go ahead and start. And Dan, that's when I say maybe I shouldn't have told you to take the presentation off. I'm going into page 14, and I'm looking forward to the opioid stat. I understand that it was stated that that is coming in the summer. So I'm definitely looking forward to that one. I want to go through some other timelines. I'm particularly interested in the intimate partner violence stat, knowing that women and girls are victims of violence, specifically shootings and murders at the highest levels in the history of our city, and also knowing that much of that may be connected to domestic violence. So I'm just looking to see what the update is on the timeline for introducing the IPV stat that you guys are working with Monty on.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you're aware, the MONSE data team is just now getting into place. So that's a key piece to allow these stats to be developed. In terms of the specific timelines, I think I'd want to defer to MONSE on the exact latest timetable on what would be expected on this. Again, given that the data team within MONSE is just starting, I know there'll be some work to develop it, but in terms of the specific timeline, I'd want to defer to their answer on that.
Nina, I don't know if we have anyone from, thank you, Dan. Nina, I don't know if we have anyone on from MONSE. Is there a timeline for IPV stat as well as the group violence reduction strategy stat?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do not have somebody on from MONSE, but I am reaching out to their office to hopefully have a response to you before the end of this hearing.
Okay, and if we can't get it by the end of the hearing, can we just get it by the end of the day? Can we just furnish it to the committee? And then I'm going to go through the other 3 stats that are saying that they are upcoming stats. What about EMS that was touched upon? Also public Wi-Fi and neighborhood stat. Do you guys have timelines for those?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Neighborhood stat will be starting this summer. Public Wi-Fi stat is something that we will start when the first new public Wi-Fi locations actually get launched and are actually operating. The purpose of that stat will be to use data to see how well those sites are operating and any trends in residents' use of those public Wi-Fi locations. So that's quite dependent on when those locations are live. It's likely to be later this year, and EMS will be also this summer. And as Justin mentioned in his presentation, that's really part of a wider package of data support that is just now starting with the fire department. But I'd say that the stat aspect of that is going to be this summer.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and get to the sponsor, Councilman Conway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I really want to thank you guys for giving us such a thorough background in the current state of stat. It seems to me that quite a bit has changed and it's more of a decentralized model. Is that fair to say?
Councilman, to me, it's really both. I mean, I think it's, the thing that I, hope, sort of the presentation was useful in describing is that really we see, city stat in the mayor's office as, a very sort of, specific role, which is, a mayor and executive viewpoint into some of the top priority issues, and the use of real analysis to complement, again, reporting on the KPIs. In terms of some of the more additional kind of operational, really in the weeds level stat work, that is something, yes, that that agencies increasingly are, and we want agencies to be doing, but it does, there's definitely a need for and room and need for both.
Yep, no, I appreciate it. I think it just helped for me to wrap my head around the structure today. And as far as the stats currently existing, I noted 4, that being police stat, youth stat, pay stat, and clean stat. I noted we don't do many of the other stats that we once did. We once statted many of the other agencies, and that's what I meant by it being decentralized. Before, each agency had their internal stats, and City Stat had stats over each agency. And how that's managed, I think, is up to the best intuition of you and your team. I do want to note that there were a number of benefits from that. I'll ask my questions. So I was curious. I mentioned in my intro that sort of downtime between mayors, from the transition from the Pugh administration to the Young administration to the Scott administration. I was curious, during that time, during that dormant time, how much time was that, and when did we actually get the ball rolling again?
Thank you, Councilman. Yeah, I really can, I can speak to my period in this role leading OPI, which began in summer 2019, when Mayor Young, became mayor. So that was, that's when I stepped into this role. There was a city stat team in place, starting in late summer 2017, in the Pugh administration, that again, sort of, I don't know how much I can speak to sort of the operations of that particular era of stats. So that was about a 2-year period, sort of after your time, and then before that I was in this role under Mayor Young. But look, I mean, there's no doubt the amount of transition that has occurred has been is a challenge for the process. And I think it's a really exciting moment we're in, where we have a really data-oriented mayor and executive team that is now, totally committed and engaged with this process.
Yeah, I want to provide full disclosure to the committee. Dan and I have had an opportunity to meet a number of times to talk about mostly what we did before and what may have been lost during that transition, which is why I asked that question, Dan. I know you guys have been working pretty hard to pick up on some of the things that may have been lost in transition, and so I think that's I find that is important for me to continue to provide. And I think you guys have done a good job in thinking about what comes next and how you want to structure the team in the office, which definitely looks different from before. But I just wanted to note that there is a difference primarily because of that continuity gap. The other question I had was a couple. How many staff are there, and what are their roles, their relative roles?
So, I'm the director of the overall, office, which includes City Stat, the Data Fellows Program, and also the innovation team. We have the deputy director, Amy Perez, who's with us on the in this hearing right now, who oversees really the day-to-day operations of the stat team. We have 3 data analysts on the team that are doing the analytical work to put together the in-depth analyses for these stats, and then we have one additional position, which is we are currently hiring for, which is a grant-funded position that is basically specifically connected to youth stat, and so that is a not a city employee role, and again, it's a little bit distinct in that they're required to support the work of youth stat. And I don't know if I saw that the city administrator had his hand up earlier, and I just want to make sure I wasn't just in case he had anything to add.
Dan, thank you very much. Want to make sure that I'm recognized by the chair.
You have the floor. We were coming to you, City Administrator Shorter.
So should I hold off, or?
You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to go back to the original question that the councilman asked around what we see as an expansion of the City Stat program. In all cases, the intent of any data effort is to make sure that that effort is not centered in one place. And so what I am certainly proud to see here in the city is that the efforts that we've seen throughout the years are now growing and expanding throughout the city. So really excited to see agencies really taking hold of data and performance related sort of operations and turning those into stats themselves. And so in the past, where it would have required a central effort to stat an agency, what we now see is that agencies have the talent and the professional expertise to stat themselves, which is the aim.
That may be partially true. I think in the past, agencies have had their internal stat programs, so that's not new. I think you guys have gone about it differently, and I think it's admirable that you guys have done that. I think one thing of note that I think was important to having some of those stats centralized was the ability to see issues across agencies and between agencies. The one that comes to mind immediately, and I know all my colleagues will, remember this conversation. We had it earlier this year and had it before I came on the council, was the closed means closed issue. Essentially, that being SRs that come in and are closed in some sort of errant way because of transfer between agencies, and identifying why those things happen. But I think to that end, I think how you might address it now is you guys would take that as an issue and dig deep on it, is how I'd see it from the current structure. It's just different, is all I'm saying.
That's correct, Councilman. That is exactly right. I think what this model allows for is the mayor and I to identify cross-agency issues or issue areas and dive deep with a stat facilitated by OPI, while also allowing for really a citywide approach to statting, which is happening at the agency level, which is oftentimes, again, what we've seen this morning, the agency is sort of dealing with agency-specific operational opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll save my other questions for later.
Thank you. We're going to get to Councilman Dorsey for any questions. We will come back to Councilman Dorsey. Councilman Torrance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the public, I apologize. My internet does not allow me to stay on WebEx with my camera on. But my first question is related to improvement science. So I love the fact that we have teams in our agencies. I love that we have these stats. But I go back to my experience back in 2009, 2010, and then my near opportunity to join City Stat in Baltimore City a long time ago when Mark Conway had hair. And my question is really related. How are we bridging silos with the stats? Because I've come into this issue where I see that from looking at the PowerPoint presentation, there's a stat where transportation is tracking where it is in projects, and then there's DPW. I have a lot of projects that are interrelated with even each agency. So how are we bridging those gaps to make system improvements on the, I hate to say this, the handoff of the baton as though we're in a race, or we're in a race, so in a relay. So case in point, Driddle Park, when the tanks are done, and DPW has completed their portion, and we turn it back over to we turn it back over to Rex and Parks. How are we using the stats to make sure that we're on time and ready to make those delivery of these actual physical projects that we see? That's my first question. And then my second question is, are we going to use improvement science intentionally in the city to improve our processes and embed people with data technology experiences to help our people who are in our agencies to make improvements to their day-to-day work operations? Because we can do things much better and smarter.
Thank you, Councilman. I'll start with my answer, but there may be others who want to weigh in, particularly on the improvement science question that you asked. So the first thing I would say is that most of our stats, at least from City Stat, are multi-agency and issue focused. So for example, Clean Stat is bringing together DHCD, DPW, Rec and Parks, DOT, in DGS. And so we are able to look at the performance of these, services in a cross-agency kind of way. And if you look at the framework slide we had shared earlier, it's structured around, key services rather than, agency by agency. So we definitely, strongly agree that we need to be looking at this, particularly for the stats that we in City Stat are convening in a kind of cross-cutting way to consider some of those interagency challenges. That's definitely at the heart of what we're doing. In terms of some of the some of the efforts around how we do things better, I think there's a number of different ways in which we're approaching that. And again, I don't see my office as the whole answer to that question by any means. I'll provide an example of something that CityStat is doing, and then something that just point at another part of my team. But one thing that's come out of CleanStat that we've been working on is that there would be benefit to a systematized cross-agency approach to how the quality assurance that is done for property maintenance is carried out across the agencies. And so we've been asked by the city administrator, we meaning CityStat, to work with agencies on codifying and clarifying the sort of those quality assurance procedures, so that in this upcoming soon to start growing season, there is more consistency and uniformity in terms of, again, the quality assurance processes. That's a good example of where something directly out of our stat, leads to a process improvement initiative, commissioned by one of our leaders. I'll say, in general, we see the stat process as about analysis and reviewing how we're performing against measurable performance targets. But that's an example of where we're getting into a process improvement area. The other piece I'd mentioned just from my office is the innovation team. That's a very specific model that they use in terms of human-centered, design-based learning and then problem solving. But that's another team or resource within my team that can work to complement and think about how we go about improving certain processes. Right now, they're working on this, supporting the rollout of these public Wi-Fi sites across the city. But again, that's another resource within my office. But again, I don't want to say that my office is the only sort of answer to that, to your question, Councilman.
So it still doesn't answer the question for me. So I'll send a separate email because to be frank, and forgive me, Madam Chair, is that while we have these stats and these dashboards, they're meaningless if the people who are actually doing the work each day aren't performing to the level of service that we need, right? And we're not making system improvements. And I go back to when the city of Baltimore switched to single stream recycling and single day trash delivery, and how when I was in the mayor's office, we physically sat with analysts in DPW, work with people at the yards, rode on actual physical trucks, and used the data and the lived experience of our employees to streamline a process that saved us millions of dollars a year. So I'm asking, like, strategically, are we thinking about creating case studies within our agencies to make improvements that will save us money over time? Because at this point, we're resource limited. So I just want to make sure that that is a clear ask to the administration about where are we going to do about resource limitations and expanding efficiencies in our government. So I'll send a more detailed list of questions for it. But my next question is then how are we tracking these projects? Because I still have issues where DOT, DPW, and others aren't talking to each other on projects. So the stats won't matter if people aren't communicating across their silos. So I just want to make sure we have a more detailed answer on the silos. But I'm going to yield back to the chair.
Thank you, Councilman Torrance. Are there any other committee members at this time who have questions before we go back to the sponsor of the bill? Okay, standing here and none, we're going to go back to Councilman Conway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the other questions I have is for the current 4 stats that we have, how often are we meeting for those?
Yeah, so the police stat is every other week. Clean stat is also every other week. Pay stat is monthly, and youth stat is monthly. This coordinated inspections process is a weekly convening.
Okay. And then more of a responsibility or oversight. I appreciated that we have the new performance management system, and that sort of sets the sort of goals and standard. I think it's going to be really helpful in keeping everybody on the same page at what we're focused on. I was curious if that is managed by city staff or if that's managed by some other person or entity in the city administrator's office.
It's going to be managed through OPI, but it's also, just to reiterate, it is forthcoming, so sort of in development. But yeah.
And do we have a timeline, any estimation on when that will be? Or
it's going to launch in 2023.
And then how often? So will those come with meetings or stat process, or is it like a dashboard that's just going on the website? What type of hands-on-ness will come with that?
To be clear, if I can,
sure.
The framework that we're talking about in terms of performance management system is one where every individual agency establishes clear benchmarkable goals. This is to say, clear KPIs associated with their day-to-day operations. Those are also KPIs that we can measure against other cities. So how we stack up against sister cities or comparable cities, we can only do through some clear performance framework. That said, these agency performance plans will be done annually. KPIs will be updated on a much more regular basis. What I have seen in other places is that is done quarterly. In terms of interaction, these will not be operationalized in the same way that the stat program is. These are agency performance plans that are very regimented, that are clear, that are publishable, and that residents can follow along on.
Awesome, thank you. And then more generally speaking to the work that the stat team has been doing in the last year, what are some of the issues that they've been focused on? And what are some of the successes, major wins that we've been able to speak from and tout for the team?
Thank you, Councilman. So, again, sort of one of the things I would say about this, kind of this administration's version of CityStat is, just the amount of analysis that is going into, particularly these, some of these more major stat processes. So, again, it's not only reporting on measurable performance targets, but it's really actual analysis about what's about particular strategies and operations. So for example, in police stat, we're using an analysis to understand place-based strategies, people-based strategies, how BPD is utilizing different key technologies, and those are things that all require pretty extensive thinking and analysis to really understand properly and to be able to have proper discussions about them. So that's kind of like the types of things that the team has been working on. In terms of some of the what I would see as some of the successes, one thing is when we look at I talked about the return to something, Councilman, that you probably remember from your day, which is complementing the quantitative analysis with inspections, the process of sending out an inspector to actually visit sites to see not just if the work was done, but how well it was done. I would, last year in the growing season, this was really critical to the work of CleanStat, and we saw, really notable improvement during the course of growing season, that I would argue those inspections and the rigor of coming back to that every other week really contributed to. And in a way that by the end of the growing season, we were seeing far more consistent service, particularly in mowing and other types of property maintenance in a way that, was quite different than the beginning. We know that there's still a lot of need for improvement, but that's something that the stat process contributed to. A couple more things I would mention. Police overtime is an example of where there has been, I think, really important improvement, the discipline of coming back to how the police department is using overtime in police stat, and breaking it down by to understand which units are using it and for what reason. We've seen significant reduction from past years. Again, not saying stat is the whole reason for that by any means, but I would argue the discipline of the stat process has been helpful. And then I'd also point to the work of PayStat, where again, reviewing the timeliness of our payment of vendors has led to a real reduction in terms of the value of the overdue late invoices. Again, more work to be done on this, but those are areas where we've seen improvements.
Thank you. And then my last question is the big one. I think the elephant in the room anytime we're dealing with issues for the city, of course, crime. That continues to be a persistent problem across the city. And I know historically, CityStat has had a significant role in pulling together partners at the city, state, and federal level to really coordinate around the prosecution and follow up and follow through of violent repeat offenders in the city. I know we have GVRS coming up, and that'll be primarily managed by Monty. I'm curious what role CityStat will have in that, and I'm curious about the scope of that. Now, of course, we've had conversations about that, and we're still sort of figuring that out. I just want to get a sense from you what we know about GVRS stat / what used to be gun stat. Are they going to be focusing on the same things? Are we focusing on guns and violent repeat offenders? What can you tell me about that, being it's of course a big issue for us right now?
Thank you, Councilman. I'll start with I'll start with the last part, which is your question about gun stat. We in terms of CityStat are looking at issues of gun violence in a variety of ways within what I would argue is really a notably robust police stat process that we do every other week. And we have a dedicated section of the meeting looking at gun related data. That said, as you note, it is what you're talking about is a multi-stakeholder and non-city government partnered effort. Anytime we're thinking about a potential introduction of a new stat process, I see this very much as something that needs to be sort of commissioned and thought about at the executive level. And I'm really looking forward to working with the mayor and the new deputy mayor for public safety to consider our current approach to our public safety oriented stats, and including questions of where there may be opportunities for new stat, new ways of approaching stat issues or something like a gun stat. So looking forward to that, being able to have that conversation. On GVRS, again, I see CityStat playing a supporting role in terms of thinking about some of the ways we think are best practices in terms of structuring stats, but very much in a supporting role, with the kind of Monty in the lead in terms of coordinating it. I think there's a lot of work underway in terms of kind of figuring out exactly how that's going to work, and I don't want to kind of speak for Monty on this. Major issues in terms of data sensitivities and other factors that need to be thought through really, really carefully. And so I know that Monty is beginning to work through those things.
Yeah, I appreciate your work on this. I think we got a lot of work to do, to be blunt. And I think CityStat could be a real boon to these efforts in just helping to be focused and consistent on our approach. So once again, I continue to extend my hand, and we've had long conversations about that. Anything I can do to provide a previous insight on how those processes worked, whether that will happen through GVRS stat or through a potential gun stat, I'm indifferent. That's up for you guys to figure out. But I do believe we need to be very, very well organized on those matters. So with that, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the City Administrator, Director Heimowitz, and your team. Appreciate you guys taking the time today.
Thank you, Councilman Conway. Before we close out questions from committee members, we're going to double back or just circle back to Councilman Dorsey. Councilman Dorsey, if you had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question about kind of stewarding agencies to have good data control practices. One of the slides that Justin showed was about data control and access. When city agencies issue contracts for services that have the potential to generate useful data, is the data office and our city stat and folks collaborating in the process of writing and reviewing those contracts to ensure that we will have the most robust set of data available to us as a result of those contracts? Like, is that happening on a routine basis, some kind of systematic way?
Happy to respond, Madam Chair. Do I need to be recognized, or?
No, you can jump right in.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the question, Councilman Dorsey. I think that's something that we're working with right now. We've drafted up as part of the Data Governance Committee in consultation with the Law Department. We've drafted language that provides for that access and ownership of the data. I think what we're wrestling with right now is that process question of, okay, great, we've got kind of language that we can kind of leverage, but injecting it into the right moment in the contracting process, it's a bit of an education process. So making data stewards aware of ongoing IT procurement or data services in their agencies so that, they can, get in with those processes to say, hey, we've got this language that's going to help, provide for better data. Soon we'll be working with, I think, our procurement office. I know there's broader conversations around procurement process. And so that also provides an opportunity for us to, again, kind of inject this language and make it more embedded in the process a little bit better. So that, I think that's the piece that I think we're kind of working through right now.
Thank you. Just as an example, the thing that is most concerning to me is the ATVES data. I have no idea who owns what elements of that information, and if not us, what the vendor is or might be required to provide us upon request, in what time frame, made by what means, right? How we have to make the request, how quickly they have to respond, and what they are obligated to give us if we ask for it, or what they do or don't keep records of, or may not be required to keep records of. So, and that's a very, potentially incredibly data rich set of information that would be critical in evaluating certain impacts, and particularly addressing a number of concerns. Liam has a pretty in-depth information request from me that DOT is looking at to get me some information presently, and hopefully very hastily. But I still don't have a clue. I've made the request, but I don't know what they're even going to be able to provide specifically, because I don't know what's available and who owns it and whether we have direct access to it or anything like that. So I just think I want to make sure that we all have the top of the mind awareness that if the city is issuing any contract that has any potential to produce data, that there is some systematized point in the process in which we say what data, evaluate, look at the big picture of the situation, evaluate what data, if any, it is going to produce, how that might be useful, and then setting some terms over ownership and access and control. Especially because I don't want us to have to wait 30 days or 60 days for a vendor to turn something around, when we could have easily said, actually, you need to give this to us. We need to have unfettered, the streamline of access to this information. The only other question I had, I think, is about and maybe this was covered and I missed it, but over the continued uploading of data to open data. You and I, Justin, have talked about parking and vehicle citations data. I haven't looked at it in the last couple of weeks, but every time I've looked at it in recent months, it is not being updated on a regular basis. 3 years ago, I could go in there and every day find data that was, as recent as 24 to 48 hours old every single day, because it was being updated continuously in like daily batches. And that is not happening right now. And that makes it really hard for us to make, consistent use of it and functional use of it. What's the deal?
Yeah, I appreciate that and share the frustration. And frankly, I think our data and GIS teams and BSIT, who manage kind of day-to-day operations of Open Baltimore, also share that frustration. Part of it, like I think I've mentioned in the past, was part of this transition onto a new platform operated by Esri. There have been kind of challenges along with the way. It's just simply not the same as the platform, the Socrata platform that I think everyone kind of knew and loved for Open Baltimore for the first, I think, 8 to 10 years of its existence. Continue to experience some technical challenges as well, just in terms of our infrastructure. And if someone from BSIT is on the line, I think it would be better for BSIT to answer some of these questions. We have only a handful of data sets, and in fact, that parking data set was one of the first to be migrated to cloud infrastructure. So this is on Esri's cloud platform, as opposed to living on internal on-premises hardware here. But there are the vast majority of data sets still live here. I think we want to move to the cloud, entirely. But that's kind of an ongoing effort. There's also, and with that migration, kind of back-end processes kind of typically need to be a little bit revamped. So it's a process to get there. And like I said, in fact, I've had several exchanges on social media with other residents who share your frustration. So just know that's something that is kind of top of mind for us. And in fact, wrestling with those challenges has also kind of slowed us from publishing new data or new data products, because we're wrestling with kind of technical challenges with existing data.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Dorsey. We are going to be moving into public testimony at this time, so we'll check to see if there are any members of the public who wish to testify on this resolution. Matt, if you could take over, Matt, if you can take over at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the public, you'll have 2 minutes each to provide your testimony. For those who signed in using a computer, please use the raise hand function to indicate that you wish to testify, and we will start with you. If you are having problems finding the button to raise your hand, you can also use the chat function and send me a message directly, and I will unmute you on your turn. After that, we will go through all the users who have called into the hearing. Attendees who called in cannot be identified by name and will be unmuted one by one. You will hear 2 beeps when you're unmuted. And if you wish to testify, please state your name at the beginning of your testimony. And if a caller does not want to provide testimony, they can simply say so after they hear the 2 beeps. And if we're not able to understand somebody, we might ask them to call back or log back in to get a better connection. And at this time, it does not look like we have any hands raised yet. And we do not have any callers this hearing.
Okay, thank you, Matt. That's going to conclude the public testimony portion on Resolution 21-0082R. Is there a motion to recommend the resolution favorably?
So moved, Conway.
And is there a second?
Our second, Torrance.
Okay, I have the motion by Councilman Conway. The second is by Councilman Torrance. McCray is a yes. Bullock?
Yes.
Conway?
Yes.
Dorsey?
Yes.
Porter? Councilwoman Porter? And Matt, can you just double check? Councilwoman Porter was having a few technical issues. Can you just double check to see if she's within the panelists or if she dropped down to an attendee for me, please?
I'm sorry. Yes, yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
So your vote was a yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Councilman Torrance?
Yes.
And Schleifer?
Yes.
Okay. The motion passed 7-0. The committee will report the resolution at the next city council meeting. We're going to go into recess for about 3 minutes prior to starting the next hearing. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move on to Bill 21-0161, City Operations Net Zero Emissions of Greenhouse Gases for the purpose of making city operations achieve net zero emissions of greenhouse gases by 2050, defining certain terms, authorizing rules and regulations, and generally related to the city's emission of greenhouse gases. For this hearing, we will again start with brief opening remarks from the sponsor. Then we will hear reports from the agencies and give committee members the opportunity to ask questions. After that, we're going to move on to public testimony. At this time, Councilman Conway, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate once again the opportunity to hold this hearing to consider this important bill, which is the last of my 4 climate package bills to put Baltimore on a more sustainable and environmentally friendly and conscious pathway. I've had some great conversations in the past few months with advocates and agencies, and I'll be putting forward some amendments toward this bill as well. In short, this bill, once amended, would require that all city operations reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. Which means a dramatic reduction in our emissions, as well as what I hope will be a limited use of offsets where emissions are unavoidable. Buildings and transportation can account for most of the emissions that enter the atmosphere for the city. And with that knowledge comes a huge opportunity to make sure that we are rehabbing buildings and replacing vehicles, and rethinking how city government works. We want to be conscious of how we can reduce emissions that pollute our communities and contribute to the worsening climate crisis. As a father, too, I know we need to get this right. And it's my hope that Baltimore can be an inspiration to other cities in how we do this, especially with our latest climate action plan in development as we speak. We're adding amendments to defer some of the Office of Sustainability's plans, to defer to the Office of Sustainability's plans to involve Baltimore residents in developing plans to tackle climate change, as well as to ensure we are putting equity and environmental justice at the forefront of these efforts. I want to shout out to all the advocates that have been really strong partners in pulling together this bill and adding amendments, and to the residents who submitted testimony today and are waiting to share their perspective. And with that, I yield back to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Conway. We're going to move on to the agencies that the bill was referred to. We're going to start with the Department of Planning.
Hi, good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. Thank you all for having us this morning. Ava Richardson, Acting Director of Sustainability for the Baltimore Office of Sustainability, also representing the Department of Planning. I'm joined by my colleague, Aubrey Gurm, who is a climate resilience planner in our office. So we stand by our report, Madam Chairwoman. We support the bill with some friendly amendments. That includes just ensuring that the bill aligns with the city's current carbon neutrality goal to reach carbon neutrality by 2045, and also just highlight that the bill does align with major goals in our 2019 sustainability plan. That includes goals in our greenhouse gas emissions chapter, which specifically call on the city to create an update to the climate action plan through an equity lens and to modify city operations and policies to reduce emissions. With that, we do stand by our report and are happy to address any questions of the committee or the council members.
Okay, thank you, Director Richardson. We're going to move on to the Office of Sustainability.
And I apologize, Madam Chairwoman, I am representing the Office of Sustainability as well.
Okay, thank you. Did you want to stand, was that report for both agencies, or do you want to stand by the report?
We do stand by our report. I do want to give our climate resilience planner, Aubrey Gurm, some time to just make some comments about the climate action plan update.
Hello, everybody. As Ava said, Aubrey Gurm, Climate and Resilience Planner in the Sustainability Office. So I just wanted to give a brief update on where we are in the Climate Action Plan update process, and also provide just a little bit of background on the 2012 plan, which is still the guiding document for climate action and emissions reductions in the city. The city's first Climate Action Plan, or CAP as we call it, was published in 2012, and this is still the guiding document for emissions reductions in the city. This plan outlines how the city will reduce emissions and set the original emissions reductions targets citywide. Key areas of this plan include energy savings and supply, land use and transportation, diversion of waste from landfills, improving water efficiency efforts, and protecting and enhancing Baltimore's urban forest. The original goal set forth in the 2012 Climate Action Plan was updated with the 2019 Sustainability Plan, and then again with the new targets just set in January that looks at achieving 30% reduction by 2025, 60% by 2030, and full carbon neutrality by 2045. We are currently in the process of updating and modernizing this citywide climate action plan to incorporate new targets, assess our progress, address climate justice and climate equity, strengthen the connection between climate change and residents' lived experiences, and set the new priorities for implementation and high impact. It is our hope that this plan will be an actionable roadmap to carbon neutrality. We are currently in the community engagement phase of this process and anticipate that the new climate action plan should be completed by June 2023. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to be moving on to the Commission of Sustainability. Dr. Richardson, are you going to be speaking for that office as well, or for the commission as well?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The Commission on Sustainability has yet to vote on this particular bill yet, and so they do apologize for the delay, but would like to submit their response once they have had a chance to confer with the commissioners and receive a vote on this particular bill.
Department of Finance.
Hi, good morning. My name is Bob Sanamy, Budget Director, representing the Department of Finance today. So we stand by our bill report. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. We took no position on this bill, and I want to explain why. As the folks from planning explained, they are working on updating the climate action plan and having a little bit more detail about the actions that will need to be taken to achieve those goals that are set forth in the bill. From our discussions with planning and folks in the energy office at DGS as well, we understand that this bill is about city operations specifically, as opposed to the city as a whole, which means there's a little bit more work for us to do to understand what particular actions will need to be taken to meet the goals. And then for us to go through the cost analysis and figure out what those costs are. I can tell you that from the work so far we've done on the vehicle bill, on the fleet bill, we have I think an understanding that some of these investments we'll need to make will have a cost up front, but might actually lead to some budgeted savings in the long term. On the fleet side, in terms of savings in fuel and maintenance. And for some of the other things we would look at, there could be, energy efficiency savings from weatherization type projects or other savings from some of the other ideas. But what we would like to do is, get to a updated climate action plan, figure out what the city needs to do to meet the goals in this particular bill, and then to provide a more detailed cost analysis of what the costs for those actions are and what the potential savings are. And at this point, we can't report honestly that we have that information. And so we're taking no position from a financial standpoint on this bill.
Okay, thank you, Director. We're going to move on to the City Solicitor's Office.
Hello, Madam Chair. This is Hillary Ruley in the City Solicitor's Office. We approved the bill for form and legal sufficiency, and I have Madam Chair's amendments, and those are also approved for form and legal sufficiency should the committee adopt those.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ruley. We are going to now, well, actually, there were a number of other agencies this bill was not referred to, but they still submitted comments or reports on the bill. Did any of the other agencies wish to chime in about their reports or have anything additional to add outside of that they stand by the report? Okay, it looks like you all are good. And again, for council members, all the information was sent, as well as the agencies that have responded that this bill was not referred to. So you do have those details. Councilman Conway, at this time, I'm going to ask you before we allow any committee questions, that you review the amendments that you submitted for the bill.
Sure, I am happy to do that. Everyone, the amendments were sent over to each of you this morning, and we have a total of 7. The first amendment, I shall give everyone a couple of seconds to pull it up. It should be in your email. Please let me know if you haven't received it or if you can't find it.
And everyone, I believe they were sent at 9:11. In case you're following along, 9:14 a.m. They would have been sent from David Pontius within Councilman Conway's office. Councilman, you can continue at this time.
Awesome. All right, so the First Amendment, it defines carbon offset. Understand we'll need to do offsets in order to meet these goals. And it says that a carbon offset means 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalent to CO2e that is kept out of the atmosphere by either preventing the creation of the emissions or sequestering carbon in vegetation, soils, rock, or water. The remainder of that amendment just aligns all of the following pieces underneath that change. And then it also makes an addition of environmental justice. It defines environmental justice as the fair treatment of all individuals, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. and then cleans up some of the ordering of the letters thereafter.
And Councilman Conway, if you could just pause at this time, we're going to see if Matt Peters can just get the amendments up so everyone can see them while you're walking through before you start with amendment number 2.
No problem. Okay, there we go. So amendment number 2, as I explained in the opening, we are going to align this bill with the previous the previous bill that would require a stepwise progression. So it adds that by January 1st, 2025, we would achieve a 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from 2007 levels. And by January 1st, 2030, a 60% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from 2007 levels, and then does some relettering after that, ultimately coming to a net zero greenhouse gas emissions goal by 2045 instead of 2050. That's been the change that we made for the bill. Amendment number 3 on page 1 in line 8 strikes 34 through 1 and 34 through 9 and substitutes it with it just did some renumbering. The next piece this it says strikes a couple lines and puts in the director's powers and duties and rules and regulations, and points to the Administrative Procedure Act to carry out the subtitle. The goal of this this one here is to once again to make sure it aligns with the 30, 60, and 100% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but also ensure that there's transparency and community-based feedback mechanisms as a part of the process towards this goal. We want to make sure that there's consistent, regular feedback between the city and the community as we endeavor upon this. Amendment number 4 substitutes 2045. And this is an amendment brought forward both by DGS and I think Finance to make sure that we have the ability to prioritize based on we would take into consideration climate for updates to buildings or other resources, but we of course would have to prioritize operations to make sure that we can continue to make sure that our buildings are safe and that we can offer basic city services. So that's what that does. Amendment number 5 would require that we establish environmental justice indicators to track impacts on the impacts of the plans. We want to make sure that this doesn't disproportionately affect communities that have historically been disadvantaged. Amendment number 6, this asks that we measure some of the health metrics, including carbon monoxide, ground level ozone, lead, nitrogen dioxide, and particulate matter, so on and so forth. And amendment number 7 this requires that the director of planning deliver a report to the mayor and city council going forward. Any questions about the amendments?
Thank you, Councilman Conway. Members of the committee, do we have any questions about the amendments? Okay, so do we have any questions about the bill? I know that we had a longer discussion in the previous resolution that was introduced, but committee members, do you have any additional questions about the bill? And I'm not seeing Any additional hands or any signals? Councilman Conway, did you have anything additional that you wanted to share before we move into public testimony?
No, just want to thank Sustainability and Planning for additional insight on the bill and making sure that it made sense in the bigger, broader plans, providing flexibility as we sorted that out. And just once again, shouting out the advocates that allowed us to take an extra look at some of the components of the bill to make sure that it, one, did what it was trying to do, but then two, took an equity focus to make sure that we're not disproportionately affecting communities as a result. So just thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Councilman Conway, on your leadership for this bill. We're going to move into public testimony. And Matt, if you could take over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the public, you'll have 2 minutes each to provide your testimony. For those who sign in using a computer, again, please use the raise hand function to indicate you would like to testify. If you're having problems with the raise hand function, you can also send a chat message to me directly. After that, we will go through callers, if we have any. And we have several individuals who signed up in advance through the council's website, and so we will start with them. And first is Andrea Van Wyck.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Andrea Van Wyck, and I am the Baltimore Community Project Manager for the Maryland, DC chapter of the Nature Conservancy, or TNC. Chair McCray and members of the Environment and Technology Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today in support with amendments of Council Bill 21-0161 offered by Councilman Conway. TNC is committed to reducing global greenhouse gas emissions, and in order to achieve this goal, we must rapidly transition to a clean energy economy. Maryland has set ambitious goals to reduce state emissions and combat climate change. And this bill seeks to set Baltimore's emissions reduction goal to net zero by 2050, presenting us with an opportunity to demonstrate our city's commitment when it comes to approaching climate change head on. By establishing a sustainability and environmental management program and creating a comprehensive sustainability plan, Baltimore can develop, implement, and coordinate projects and policies that will progress the citywide emissions goal. Alongside partner organizations, Blue Water Baltimore, Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and the National Aquarium, who all submitted written testimony, TNC supports amendments that will make this bill more progressive, equitable, and transparent. Following the recent IPCC report, it is undeniable that achieving net zero emissions economy-wide is crucial in protecting current and future generations' health and well-being. Through the 2019 Baltimore Sustainability Plan, the city has set ambitious yet necessary goals to mitigate climate change. To meet 2030 and 2050 targets, city leadership needs to commit to taking immediate action and enacting effective strategies. The Nature Conservancy commends Councilman Conway and the many co-sponsors of this bill for continuing to raise the bar for Baltimore's climate commitments, and for these reasons, the Nature Conservancy urges a favorable report with amendments on Council Bill 21-0161. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next, we have Ryan Frederickson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Ryan Frederickson, Vice President of Government Affairs at the National Aquarium. I'm here to request a favorable report with amendments for Council Bill 21-0161. I want to start by first commending this council administration for their leadership on climate change, specifically the recent resolution and commitment to make Baltimore a carbon neutral city by 2045. The National Aquarium is currently charting our own course to reach net zero emissions. We expect to exceed the net zero goal outlined in this bill. And based on this experience, we are recommending amendments along with Blue Water Baltimore and Chesapeake Bay Foundation to strengthen the bill that build upon recognized best practices. First and foremost, we would like to see an improved definition of net zero that emphasizes emissions reductions over carbon offsets. Generally speaking, any company or government can pay to have or pay to be carbon neutral by purchasing enough offsets to negate their emissions. However, Best practices suggest that net zero should be focused on permanent reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and only relying on offsets to balance emissions that cannot easily or practically be eliminated. In short, you can pay to be carbon neutral, but you need to do the work to reduce emissions to become net zero. Several of the leading resources for cities, including the Greenhouse Gas Protocol for Cities, suggest defining a limit on the maximum amount of carbon offsets a city can use to reach this goal. They go on to say that this is essential for the purposes of prioritizing and maximizing direct reductions in gross emissions. We suggest a definition of net zero adopted from the city of Austin and rooted in best practice that limits the use of offsets to no more than 10% of the city's baseline emissions. Additionally, the city should adopt generally accepted language for what a carbon offset is to ensure accuracy, integrity, and the maximum possible environmental benefits. Lastly, we hope the council will pay special attention to how this legislation is implemented with respect to historically overburdened or underserved communities. We also request additional language to increase public input and transparency. And I'll add that several of these requests have been incorporated into the sponsored amendments. We greatly appreciate that. So my written testimony has additional information on the best practices we hope the city will adopt. We respectfully urge the committee to issue a favorable report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Taylor Smith-Hams.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair McCray and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Taylor Smith-Hams, and I'm the Advocacy and Outreach Senior Manager at Blue Water, Baltimore. We urge your support of 21-0161 with amendments that have been developed in collaboration with the National Aquarium and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. By making city government operations net zero, this bill will help fight climate change by reducing local emissions and ensure that the city of Baltimore is modeling a more sustainable path forward. As the City Council considers this important bill, it should strengthen it by supporting amendments to speed up the timeline, reduce the use of offsets, center environmental justice, increase participation and transparency, and ensure there's adequate capacity. As we have noted in previous testimony, net zero does not mean the same thing as zero emissions. Zero emissions should be the ultimate goal in order to truly limit the effects of climate change. But well-crafted net zero policies can help cut emissions and build toward that target. Since climate change disproportionately affects low-income and Black and Brown communities, any actions to address the climate crisis must center these communities. Therefore, we urge the City Council to incorporate language to prioritize any building upgrades, capital projects, or other investments associated with this bill in communities on the front lines of climate change. Furthermore, when tracking progress in achieving its net zero target, the city should use key environmental justice indicators to track community environmental health impacts in addition to reductions in greenhouse gases. The city should engage communities in collectively developing meaningful metrics that address how residents see they're being impacted. Such metrics can include reductions of criteria pollutants, including ground level ozone, particulate matter, and lead, and the distribution of environmental benefits and harms across different communities. Our written testimony includes more information about these important amendments, many of which have been incorporated. Mayor Scott and the Office of Sustainability have already established a goal of reaching carbon neutrality across the city by 2045. City government operations must lead this transition by becoming net zero. We urge a favorable report on this bill with the suggested strengthening amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Julieta Rodrigo.
Good afternoon, honorable members of the committee, agencies, and everybody else on the line. It's really an honor to be here, and I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. My name is Julieta Rodrigo, and I'm the Urban and Community Resilience Manager at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We really applaud the effort to make city operations net zero. If adopted, we know that this bill would help improve public health, it'll protect the Chesapeake Bay, and it's going to further social justice in our city. We urge a favorable recommendation from the committee with support of the filed amendments that were discussed previously. I stand with the statements made by the Nature Conservancy, the National Aquarium, and Blue Water Baltimore regarding the importance of net zero definitions, limits on offsets, public input, and more. Overall, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation is enthusiastic for this conversation, and we ask you for your support on this bill and amendments. Together, we can continue and expand the great work that all the people on the line today have already done to preserve the health of residents, the Bay, and our state. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Madam Chair, it looks like that is the last of public testimony.
Okay, thank you, Matt. That will conclude public testimony for Bill 21-061. Is there a motion for Councilman Conway's amendments?
So
So moved.
A second, Conway.
Okay, so I have a motion by Councilwoman Porter and I have a second by Councilman Conway. All those in favor say yay, and all those opposed say nay.
Yay.
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 And I'm a yay. Okay. Is there and the motion has passed. Is there a motion to recommend the bill favorably as amended?
So move Torrance.
Second, Conway.
Okay, so motion by Councilman Torrance, second by Councilman Conway. McCray is a yes. Bullock? Councilman Bullock? Okay, absent. Councilman Conway?
Yes.
Councilman Dorsey?
Yes.
Councilwoman Porter? Councilwoman Porter?
Yes, can you hear me? I'm so sorry.
It's okay. We got your vote now. Okay.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Councilman Torrance?
Aye.
Okay, and Councilman Schleifer?
Yes.
Okay, so this motion has
Madam Chair,
passed.
I'm back. I'm sorry.
Okay. Councilman Bullock?
Yes.
Okay. So this motion has passed 7-0. The committee will report its recommendation at the next city council meeting. I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning and into the afternoon. This hearing is now adjourned.
Thank you, Madam Chair.